Paul understands that Jesus was the crucified Messiah. This is the important point. Paul understands Jesus as the crucified Messiah. If a first century Jew talked about someone who was crucified, what do they have in mind? Romans crucified people all the time. When people talked about crucified people, what did they mean? You can read any ancient source. Read Josephus if you want to. Read any ancient source. What do people mean when they talk about someone who's crucified? They talk about the same thing time after time after time. They mean somebody that the Romans nailed or tied to a cross in order to publicly humiliate and torture to death. That's what they mean. If Paul said that Jesus got crucified, what does he mean? He means the same thing. He doesn't mean that Jesus was killed in outer space by demonic powers circling the globe. He's referring to a death that the Romans inflicted on criminals. That's what everybody means in the first century. Second, if Jesus did not exist, let's just say, suppose he did not exist, then necessarily the Christians invented him. And so the big question, if the Christians invented Jesus as the Jewish Messiah, the Messiah, the Christ, would they invent the idea that as the Messiah, he got crucified? If you work hard enough at it, you might be able to imagine inventing a God who got killed and raised from the dead, as many mythicists say. But that's not what Paul talks about. Paul doesn't talk about God who was crucified. Paul talks about Christ who was crucified. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 2. We do nothing among you except for Christ and him crucified. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 3 and following. I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins, according to the Scriptures, and was buried. By the way, he was buried. It's a little hard to do in the outer space. Christ was crucified. Paul talks about Christ who was crucified.